Yeah, well, first of all, I just noticed how you started that video, Matt, and I don't say salvation by any means. But anyway, this is to Jogyan, and I guess I usually I talk to you a lot, I think, but typing because I'm having trouble pronouncing your name, or maybe I'm not. Okay, so you said blah 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 again. Flight into perceptions. If you can get your hands on Penrose's Road to Reality, read section 1.45. You are skirting the edges of the triangle of the issue. Well, I looked up the Penrose thing, can't find anything online. I guess I'll read that eventually. I'm not that familiar with Penrose, but I am familiar with lots of arguments against the way skepticism puts this. But you do go on to describe some sort of a triangle. You say here I am demonstrating exactly the shade of anti-Platonism in the eighth note of that first chapter. Well, I could cop to being guilty of that because, you know, I am anti-Platonistic. I think Plato uh, idealized the men's ideas into these forms, into these pure things. He idealized them into this metaphysics. He metaphysicalized them or something. And but then you say that here applying it to the mental aspect of reality. The mental aspect of reality. Yeah, I mean, my anti-Platonism applies to everything. I don't believe in a world of forms per se that are fundamental. I believe in, you know, programs and machines. I believe there's such a thing as a computer program. I believe there's ideas which are some, you know, configuration of the brain. I mean, I leave a lot of wiggle room for exactly what that configuration is. But, you know, it's something you could call a configuration of the brain, and is material and, you know, not ideal in that sense. Then you say 2 plus 2 equals 4 is merely a trivial example of mathematical truths. Tell me, how do you derive? How do you derive that? Well, as I thought I left a comment somewhere, but, you know, if you take two apples and you take two apples and you you counted the first two and you counted two, and you take another group of two and then you group them together and you count them, you're going to get four apples. So we abstract counting and then math that way. Okay, you know, because first we have all these patterns, we start to recognize patterns and have the ability to count these nodes in the pattern. Okay, and then you say theorems of topology or functional analysis or more dimensional and non-Euclidean geometry from mere perceptions. Why do you say mere? Why are perceptions mere? I think perceptions are overwhelming. It's amazing people say they're mere. But theorems of topology, listen, mammals have concepts of topology. Now, it might be not what you mean by topology because you mean some specifically human part. But they have the components. We were mammals. We got the components of the human thing from these animals. We share a material reason to understand topology, right, of your geography. Okay, that's one of the most practical things to understand when you're living and strategizing as a predator or as prey. Now, you know, higher dimensional mathematics seems clear to me the way I have tried to imagine and succeeded to whatever degree to imagine them is by abstracting from the, you know, the handful we have, the 1, 2, and 3 dimensions and the, you know, the strange sort of nil point 0 dimensions, you know, and that we have a little tiny series that we can try to use induction, you know, watch Flatland to get an idea of what it might be like to be 4-dimensional. um, and it's the same with non-Euclidean geometry. I mean, so we have Euclidean geometry. It's one of the oldest styles. It still appeals to us in a lot of ways, the Cartesian coordinate system. So, so what? We figured out how to, it's like a house in San Francisco. You figure out how to lift up the house and rebuild the foundation to make it earthquake safe. You know, so they figured out, hey, we can take some of these patterns and these formulas, all figured out from counting and real world things, and we can fit them in, you know, to the Euclidean space, you know, as this coordinate, as this way of organizing the space. And, you know, we get different mathematical results. Do those apply to reality? Often. It's funny how often they do. Do they always? I don't know. That's a debate. But, you know, it's not funny that it does apply to reality in the first place. I mean, we looked at reality, we saw the patterns, we abstracted patterns, and it's like when a drop of water drops off of some, you know, run that it's dropping off of. just one drop. In the next drop they'll look random, but over time there's a pattern. Even you could say that even if it's a stochastic or random pattern, but often there's a more regular pattern when things wear or just do a certain kind of behavior that has a randomness in each event, but over time you see the pattern. Okay. Um, and that's what mathematical concepts are. They're patterns. There's millions of experiences in the idea of counting, are the reality of these numbers. Millions of experiences and abstractions, and they've gotten to be very definite ideas. And if you take a Platonic approach, it's like, isn't it amazing? I think that the Earth, that the world is mathematically organized. Yeah, it's behind math. And it's like, well, it's sort of a coincidence because you started with just all the world, information flow, overwhelming perceptions. And then you came up with math and patterns over time. You can see, we teach kids counting before we teach them any other math because you need counting. And we know there's practical reasons to count. And mammals share, and as they're becoming more sophisticated sharing, they might learn to count, or any other number of reasons you could come up why you develop counting from these, in evolutionary biology. And so, it's not that surprising that patterns derived from nature over millions of years apply back to nature. That's not really, that's sort of, kind of the, I don't know, should it be the first law of patternology or something? It's not super surprising. And, the only thing that makes it seem like maybe it should be surprising is this idea that I can just figure out math from nothing. Well, I don't think so. If I had a computer that was trying to figure out topology, I would give it eyes so they could see. Now, a computer can't figure out the kind of topology you're talking about, where there's the symbolic understanding and the ability to really think in the subject matter. But a human brain can, and it's also a device, and it needs cameras to find out, And then when it comes up with ideas it hasn't found out from reality, it can do that for a while, but before long it's got to go back and check. That's why, it's like you can do math and break lines up into points for 100, 1,000 years until somebody tries to use that for some detail and goes, geez, that doesn't work. I'm going to break it up into little line segments. And then the math changes and is more advanced. And, it's evolving from these experiences. To me, it's amazing how abstract and ideal and a priori people are willing to say that mathematics is, when it's obviously developing like any other field of knowledge. Our mathematical ideas, they're supposed to be a priori, but from the beginning of time, without a body, you could just think them out of nothing, and yet here we are still trying to prove theorems and figure out new kinds of mathematics and new kinds of logic. And isn't that amazing that it's all a priori logic, and yet we have new kinds of logic every decade, new forms of logic, sometimes fairly radical or definitely different and interesting. We find out the limitations of our logic, and it's like, well, we wish we had a new logic. So that's my response. Thank you for your comments and your indignation at my denial of absolute truth, or whatever it is. Anyway, that's my reply to the triangle comment. Plural. Cheers.